Hey guys, I'm AH Designs and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I am sharing a brand new tutorial video with all of you. After seeing my Lolita fashion attempt, a lot of people actually had some questions about how I usually make my bows. I've made many bows and many bow styles throughout my sewing experiences, both for cosplay and for fashion items, so I thought I would actually share a little tutorial with all of you. The kind of bows I'll be showing you how to make is a 3D bow, such as this one right here, so it has a little loop. And I'll also be showing you how to make 2D bows, which don't have the loop and are just simple and flatter. So I'll be going over how you make both of these styles and how you can also decide what size you want. And yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. These cute bows, here's a few things that you will need. You will need the fabric you intend to use, some paper to make some patterns out of, interfacing to stiffen your bows, and of course your sewing supplies and things like chalk and scissors. So let me show you how I do this and first off we're going to start off with how I make the patterns for the bows and figuring out sizing. Off camera I've gone and made these two patterns here out of some grid paper. The way I figure out the size I'm going to be using is I basically cut pieces out and just test to see how they'd look. So I fold the middle, spread it out a little bit and see, okay, is that the size I want? So for the first style of bow, I'll be doing it very small because I need it for my Lolita dress. And the second one will be for a head bow. And I'm gonna be doing them in two different styles as mentioned before. So the big one will be the looped 3D style, and this will be the more 2D style for the little bows that I'm gonna be making for the dress. So first up, I'm going to show you how to cut out the more 2D bows. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your little pattern piece and you're going to put it onto your fabric, preferably in a corner like this. Make sure to add some space for some seam allowance. Luckily in my case, my print is blocked like this, so I know where 1/2 inch is. So you're going to simply trace out to like this. And then where that line that you created is, put your second one like that. Now for the looped style of bow. Now this one's very much the same, except in this case I am going to have to mark out where 1/2 inch lies because I don't have the handy dandy little checkerboard doing it for me. So first and foremost, I'm going to find where that is on here. So I line up with 1/2 inch on my ruler. I'm just going to draw a line. Keep in mind this is the wrong side of the fabric. It's less vibrant than the real side. And you're going to mark where your fold line will be, just like so. And of course, reflect it over that line, just like the other one. And this time, you're going to add more this way as well. This doubles the width, and then therefore you can add that 3D element later. You'll see what I mean. Now you just take your ruler and you add on your seam allowance, because once again, this fabric doesn't give us automatic seam allowance like the last one. So 1/2 inch around that way, and 1/2 inch this way. Before we move on to anything else, we do have to cut out the center of the bow. In the case of the looped bow, I'm going to put a center band across it. The little ones won't need anything because they are rather tiny. So I'm going to go and make a strip, which will later add as the middle of the main bow for the head bow. The last thing you're going to need to cut out is some interfacing. Interfacing, if you're not sure what it is something that adds a little bit of body and stiffness to your garments, and it simply fuses on when you press it. I believe my tiny bow, yeah, there we go. And you don't need to redo your pattern flipping, you already have it cut out. So you just simply take it and cut some pieces out. And of course you repeat the same if you're doing the loop style of bow, which is going to take up a lot more than the little one that I did before. Next up is pressing your fabric decently flat so that there's not too many wrinkles, and making sure you have it the right side down. You want the lines that you just drew on and the faded side to be upwards. So this will be the outside of the final bow. And then you're going to take your fusible interfacing, and one side, if you feel one side's more smooth, and the other one you can feel the little glue dots. So the glue dotty side will face the faded side, so the wrong side of the fabric, like so. And then you take your iron and you press. This could take quite a while to have it all melt, have all the glue melted in place. Depends on the interfacing you're using. So at this point, no matter what style you're doing, you should have some rectangles of fabric, like so. So I'm going to show you first off how to pin together the smaller one, the 2D style. If you look closely, you can still see that my fold line is slightly visible there. And you're going to make sure that you fold it with the right sides together, so the interfacing is what you're seeing on the outside at the moment. And you pin along like this. And you're going to stitch along here, leaving out an opening at the very, very bottom. And stitch it, continue to stitch it this way. In either case, it could be a good idea to mark where you're going to start and stop on your piece, just so you remember to not just zoom past it with your sewing machine. I'm going to put my opening on this one, I think right here. And this pin to over here. Maybe this pin to this pin. You want to make sure that the hole you do is big enough so that you can actually bring it inside out afterwards. Now you should have your pieces all ready to be taken inside out, but before you do that, you have to clip all your little corners, like so. Be very careful not to actually clip your sewing, but try to get as close as possible to the stitching. This will make pulling your bow inside out a lot easier, and you'll be able to get those corners a little crisper, which will help with putting the whole thing together. Now it's time to take all your pieces and pull them inside out. Let's not forget this 2B piece as well, which will be for the center. This one's going to be a little trickier because it's a little different. Well, your pieces should look a little something like this. So the next thing you're going to do is press them out. When you do this, you're going to be careful of the seam at the bottom to make sure it's fully flattened out like so. Now this guy's pretty easy to press because I can just kind of cover it completely. You want everything to be nice and crisp when it's done. There's that hole there, so when we get to that area, we're going to want to make sure we fold that seam allowance in there so you can hardly tell it's there. At this point, you'll have these nice pieces, but you'll still have some little holes in there. So what you'll want to do is close them up. I personally like to use a slip stitch because it's something that you cannot see. A lot of other people like to use whip stitch instead. It all depends on what you like. So I'm going to demonstrate quickly a slip stitch on the little guy, and I'm going to repeat it for this piece and, well, the other little guy I'm making. And that will close it up so there's no gaping holes in our bows. So if you repeat the slip stitch also on the larger piece, on the tube design, you'll have a nice little closed area now. What you do is you take your two ends and you fold them inwards, and you simply do that stitch once again, or do a ladder stitch. Just connect these two with a hand stitch so that you have a full loop like this. At this point, you should have pieces that either look nice and flat like a rectangle like this, or a very large rectangular loop shape like this if you're doing the 3D look. So, to make this finally into an actual bow, you're going to play around with it and fold it into the shape that you want. In my case, I want my shape to look something like this. So, I'm going to take my thread, start from the underside, determine which side is the underside too. Put my thread in, and then I'm going to start to stitch it down, right down the center. Now, if you're doing the looped style of bow, you're going to want to make sure that the seam you've done is in the very center of where you're going to have the folds and such. And just like the other one, you're going to figure out the way you want it to fold. Do you want to have multiple folds? I'm also just going to do it the same way I did the other ones, and just going to stitch through it a few times. In this case, this one's also going to get a loop down the center of it. At this point, you should have a piece that looks like this, and you're going to want to cover this up. So what you're going to do is take your little strip piece, and you're going to line this up, the sewn end right here. Wrap it around, make sure you're centered and looking good. Okay. And you're going to want to find the area you're going to want to cut. So in my case, as you can see, it's way too long. It would just keep rolling around. We don't really want that. I'm going to cut it right here. I'm going to tuck that under there so the raw edge is hidden. And put that right there. Like that. Pull it nice and tight. Pull it over. And it will look like that once you stitch that down. A slip stitch, a whip stitch, or whatever other stitch you would desire here. So that is it for the tutorial. That is all the steps on how to make the bows. How you want to attach them to yourself or to your garments is up to you. I have used Velcro, I've also used hair clips, all sorts of different ways, or like in the case of these little guys right here, I'm going to sew them right to the garment itself. So I hope this video was helpful, and if it is, consider subscribing, and remember to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff if you're here. And I'll see you in the next video. Let me know if there's any other tutorials you'd like me to cover, whether it's a fashion related item or cosplay related, because of course I do a little bit of both. Thanks for watching, and bye guys!